You're listening to the Meet the Farmers podcast with me, your host, Ben Eagle. Please remember to subscribe to the show wherever you are listening. Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 189 of the Meet the Farmers podcast with me, Ben Eagle. Now, before we start, I just want to do a shout out and say thank you to both Farmer Gala and _Joe_Sky on Instagram for posting about the podcast on your Instagram stories. I find it really interesting to see what people are doing when they listen to the pod. So in Gala's case, this was fencing, and in Joe's case, it was riddling compost. So I would love to see what you're doing. So if you could take a picture or a video showing that and post it on Twitter or Instagram and tag us at MTF_podcast, that would be amazing. And I will retweet or repost from our end. Now, we are recording this episode on Wednesday, the 1st of March, which in the US is National Pig Day. I don't think we have a National Pig Day in the UK, but I'm going to claim the relevance of that for today's episode. That's because my guest today is pig farmer Flavian Obiero. Flavian manages 130 sows from farrow to finish on a mixed farm in Hampshire, which also has sheep, beef, arable, and a farm shop. Before he started this role in 2021, he managed the pig unit at Plumpton College in East Sussex. He came into farming almost by accident. He moved to the UK at the age of 15, having grown up in Kenya. The plan was to go to university to study veterinary medicine, but instead he ended up taking a year out after his A-levels. After completing a week's placement on a farm, he was offered a job and ended up working there for his gap year. He hasn't looked back since. He holds a BSc in Animal Management and Animal Sciences and an MSc in Animal and Livestock Husbandry in Production. He's currently the Vice Chair of the Young National Pig Association, Deputy Chair of the North East Hampshire branch of the NFU, the South East Rep for the NFU's Next Generation Forum, and a Trustee of the charity Jamie's Farm. He's also one of the most prominent voices calling for greater diversity in British agriculture. Flavian Obiero, welcome to Meet the Farmers.
Morning, Ben. Thank you for having me.
It's great to have you here. How's your week going? And happy National Pig Day as well in the US.
Yes, yeah. Happy National Pig Day to all the US pig farmers. And seeing as I don't think we've got one in this country, we'll enjoy it as well. I'll share with my fellow farmers shortly after this podcast.
Yeah, please do.
Week's going good. It started quite well. I was at the races on Monday with Jamie's Farm, actually, back to Plumpton where I used to live. So that was pretty good. I'd lived there for 6 years and I never went to Plumpton races. Even though the rugby team I played for, Plumpton, the pitch was right in the middle of the racecourse. I never actually got to go to watch the races there. So it's good to be there on Monday. And then I've got butchery today after the podcast. So the week's on course to be a good one.
Good. Yeah, you're a busy guy, as we were saying before we started recording. So what is it about pigs that you like? And of all the sectors, why pigs?
I would say my first experience of pigs was at my uncle's farm in a town called Kikuyu, which is probably about 40 minutes from the center of Nairobi, which is the capital city of Kenya. And yeah, he used to farm pigs for Farmer's Choice, which I think is probably the biggest pig sort of integrator or pig company in East Africa. And yeah, I remember sort of going around Nairobi with my auntie, picking up sort of leftovers from different hotels. Obviously, it's illegal here. And sort of bringing it back, sorting out all the toothpicks and whatever else, bottle caps that weren't supposed to be in there, chucking it in a sort of 200-litre oil drum, mixing it with the ground up meal, and cooking it down a bit and then feeding it to the pigs. And the mixture of the smell of that food as well as their excrement was quite an attraction to me, apparently, according to my mum. I'd go back to the house and I'd just sit there and not get changed. I'd like to confirm that's worn off. I'm not like that anymore. If I'm working, I'm okay with the smell. If I'm clean, I don't want to smell like pigs. But yeah, that's where it started. And then one of my granddads also had pigs. And every time I went to his place, I saw just how much he loved the pigs. I think for him, pigs enabled him to educate all his kids, to sort of build houses for himself and his family. So seeing how much he loved pigs, I think gave me again that insight into farming, and sort of it made me a bit inquisitive as to why pigs. And then when I did the week's work experience on the farm that I'm on now, actually in 2010, I was supposed to work with pigs. I ended up concreting all week. And being offered the job at the end of the week, I was sort of started off with the weaners, which are basically from 4 weeks old to about 10 to 12 weeks. So I was just looking after them for a while. And then the then pig manager had to go get his hips done. So he was off one summer for about 3 months. So myself and the then farm manager sort of said, okay, you can have to look after the sows and I'll help you. And I had no clue. So it's almost every day asking questions. What do I do with this? Like I remember the first time I AI'd a sow, I was told, this is how you do it. He did one and he's all right. There's a straw. There's the AI. See you later. And that was that. But I'm glad I learned that way, because then you're right in the deep end and it's sink or swim.
Yeah. That's not the thing. Is like, whatever you're doing for the first time, you're doing it for the first time, aren't you? Once you've done it for the first time, then as time goes on, you do learn. And you learn quickly.
Yeah. And I'd say sort of now I've got into the job. I think this is my 13th year farming, is that comparing pigs to other animals, I like the fact that they don't care what the human is thinking. They're bossy, they're sassy, they're strong. They know all those things. So whenever you're trying to do something with a pig, you almost have to work with them. Otherwise, if you're working against a pig, 9 times out of 10, you're going to lose.
So let's turn to you. What 2 characteristics about you do we need to understand to begin to understand you as a person?
I would say, I've written down here, I had to think for a while about this. I'd say I'm driven and self-motivated. And then the other one would be optimistic. And I think that's quite a key one, especially the way things are going at the moment. And I always try and find a positive in anything. And I see that in all sorts of situations, like whether it be being at school and sort of failing an exam. I always think, okay, I failed because of ABC, and how can I make that better? Or if, let's say, an animal doesn't have a big litter, or like the other day, I had a video which I uploaded on TikTok, which went wild, of a gilt that gave birth outside. It's her first litter. She gave birth by the feeder rather than in the hut. She had 4 choices of huts to go into. She had 3 other animals in that paddock that farrowed in their huts unassisted. This one farrowed outside, made a hell of a mess. She laid on a few. And for me, I like doing that video and explaining it to people. I was thinking, it's her first time. This is probably the first one it's the first one I've had here since I came back in November 21. And even when I used to work here before, we hardly ever have gilts do that. Yeah. And last year, the sows that we had farrow outside, they never make such a mess. They farrow in a little sort of corner where they make their nest with grass or whatever. Some of them want to farrow al fresco. That's up to them. But they never make such a mess. But for me, the positive out of that was, okay, this young animal, I'm going to take her to the hut, take the piglets she's got left into the hut, foster some more onto her, and give her a chance for the second time. Because a lot of people are, get rid of it. It's not a good mother. Make it into bacon, which is, from a business mind, that's easily the most sort of, it's the most logical thing. You think, okay, you're not cut out for motherhood, get out the way. But then you got to ask yourself a question, as a human or as humans, we've bred these animals to have certain traits. And in that process, we have amplified some traits. And whilst amplifying some traits, others have been pushed down. So we don't know whether in this particular animal, there's some sort of, in that situation, there's some sort of imbalance in the traits, whether the mothering traits didn't kick in at that point. Well, now she's got 9 piglets and she's doing really well. She's suckling them. She's protective of them. Whereas if I was to be like, okay, I'm going to take the 6 off her and get rid of her, she would have never got that chance to be a mother properly. So, yeah, I guess that's where the optimism for me helps, and also obviously with supermarkets and the whole thing of producing pork at £17 a pig loss currently. And I remember at its worst in 2020, 2021, some people are losing close to 50 quid or even more. So if you're not optimistic in such a situation, you won't last long.
This episode is being supported by our primary sponsor, A-Plan Rural. Why did I want to collaborate with A-Plan Rural? Well, having got to know them, their team shares my passion for giving a voice to farmers, and we are both driven to raise the profile of farming voices to a wider audience. So it seemed quite a good fit. Quite frankly, together we will be able to do a lot more. A-Plan Rural do a lot of work on social media themselves, sharing farming accounts and farming stories. They have a rural community blog which shares farmers' experiences, and they also support a growing number of initiatives that champion UK farmers, including this podcast. So a big thank you to A-Plan Rural for supporting Meet the Farmers. Let's go back to your early years in Kenya, because you grew up in the coastal town of Kilifi. What was life like for you then, and what influence did that time have on you?
Oh, Kilifi, honestly, I think I have to have a house there.
Really?
Probably in the next 10 or 15 years. But we need to set up somewhere. Like Dad I bought a plot of land there somewhere, and I still got a pub that he rents out to someone to run. But Kilifi, for me, when I think of Kenya, that's home for me, because that's where we moved there when I was about 2 years old and lived there till I was 12. So for me, that's when I think of Kenya, even though my ancestral home will be Kisumu in Western Kenya, because Dad is a Luo. Kilifi for me that's home. And like you say, with the childhood memories, I started school there. I remember walking to school. I think at one point we lived by the sea, and it was probably about a 40-minute walk, half an hour, 40-minute walk to school in the morning. And just the fun of walking to school and going past where your friends live and picking each other up, just walking to school. It was just, it was so good. And then I remember days when, if it was raining, I remember a few times, and Mum always used to tell me off for this, because I had friends that couldn't afford shoes, so they'd come to school bare feet. But because we could afford shoes, I'd take my shoes off to be like them. So like on days when it was raining, we'd leave our bags at school. So let's say you had, I remember at that age, let's say you have maths, English, science on that day, you just take those books. So you leave the books at school because you're going to need them the next day. Yep. Just take literally your shoes, socks in your hands, and you're just walking around in just a t-shirt and shorts. Because if it's in Kenya, it could be raining, like a torrential rain, and it's 28 degrees. So it's not cold. We're walking around playing in paddles bare feet. And I think, thinking back now as an adult, I think it was my way of trying not to stand out, because I knew that I've got friends here that can't afford shoes, or they're in flip-flops. Okay. I've got shiny shoes that get polished every night. And I'd think, okay, why should I walk around in the rain in my shoes when they're walking bare feet? So I'd always used to take my shoes off, and I'd get told off when I get home. But yeah, looking back, I think that shaped what I am now as a person. And I think whenever I'm around people that aren't, not saying that I'm rich or anything, but I've never slept hungry. I've never slept outside. I've always had a roof over my head. All those simple, basic things, which for a lot of people are just by the by because of the way life is now, but they're essential to people's happiness. Whenever I'm around people that don't have those things, that when I go back home to Kenya, I always just remember where I'm from, and knowing that I've got family members that are in these situations, and it just keeps me grounded. I don't get lost in the sauce, as people say in slang. I don't get lost in the everyday hype of, oh my God, I'm this, I'm on Instagram, I've got this. I know where I'm from. So for me, in whatever I do, that's my foundation. And some people always sort of wonder, why do you seem so driven? Why do you seem so relaxed? I'd say I saw it about 2-3 months ago, where Kenyans are talking about how people at the coast in Kenya are always so relaxed. Some people see them as lazy, slow at doing things. Whereas people in Nairobi, which is similar to like London, everyone is so hyped up. If you do something, someone's always done a better thing, or there's always a better club to go to, a better bar, a better restaurant. Whereas at the coast, people are just content and they're happy what they've got. They've got good weather, they've got good food, they've got the beach there. Why should you rush
What
around?
more do you
And
want?
honestly, yeah. And there's a phrase in Kenya called Mombasa Raha, and Raha means like happiness. So anyone going to Mombasa, it's just going to be a hell of a time. And I'm so glad I grew up there because those memories just keep me going. Same for my sister. She's 23. And yeah, we're just so thankful that we grew up in such a community.
When you're growing up, what did you want to do as a career?
So I had three career choices, which thinking back now as an adult, I'm like, what was I thinking? So I wanted to be a doctor because Mum's eldest brother is a doctor. I also wanted to be a vet because my one of my uncles who passed away, he was a vet, and I wanted to be a vet so he could see me being a vet and sort of make him proud. And then I also wanted to be an executive chef because I remember Dad teaching me how to cook, and my speciality for a while was a Spanish omelette. And sort of thinking now to achieve all those careers to your peak, that would take easily 20 years of my life. So the doctor career got knocked on the head when I saw a patient with HIV, and he was on his last legs. Like I remember walking in hospital with Mum and seeing this guy laying on the floor. He was essentially, best way I describe, because I was about 13 or 14 then. He was essentially a skeleton with skin on. And I saw that and I said to my mum, what's wrong with that guy? And she told me, and I was like, I don't like seeing people suffering. Yeah. That's me out. Like even now, when you see those adverts of like, let's say WaterAid or things showing kids that are suffering, I switch the channel because for me, I think I've seen it firsthand. I don't like seeing people suffering. And especially if I'm in a position where I can't do anything about it, why should I torment myself watching people suffering when I can't help? So for me, I just, not to blanket off that it doesn't happen, to blanket off in a sense that if I can't do anything, why should I look at it? But that's just me. And then the veterinary profession, that got knocked on the head when I realized that the amount of work needed to be a vet and my grades did not match what was required. And also my dad told me that why do you need to be a vet to have animals? Because my argument as a kid was I want to be a vet so that when I've got dogs and cats and cows or whatever, I can treat them myself, which is a very expensive way to have animals. So that was that. And then the chef career, when I was doing food tech in GCSE when I came to the UK, which was my only A actually. Dad told me you don't want to be a chef because you're going to be doing long hours to achieve being an executive chef. And here I am as a farmer. So I've not actually reminded him that advice, but I wonder what he thinks now.
How did you see rural then and the countryside? Were you attracted by the idea of a rural life? How did you see that?
Thinking about this is that the way rural is seen here, there's just such a big divide in like a city or you're out in the sticks, like no street lights or whatever. In Kenya, the difference with here and Kenya is that here you could be in the rural area, but you got electric, you got running water, you got internet, even though it's not that good. Whereas in Kenya, rural is rural. Like I remember Mum telling me that the first time we went to my nan's place in Kisumu, I said to my mum, I think I was 4 years old or 3. I said to my mum, if Nan is living in a mud hut, I'm not going in, because I grew up in Mombasa at the time and Kilifi, and I'd always been in towns. So I was like, if Nan lives in a mud hut, I'm not going in. Luckily, she lived in a stone house, so I did go in. But thinking back now, why are you being such a little spoiled kid? But I didn't know any different. And I had experiences of rural life from such a young age. And there where my cousins that lived in a sort of less privileged upbringing than I did. So whenever I went there, I'd be the one with new clothes. They'd have sort of old clothes, torn clothes. I'd always take my clothes that didn't fit me anymore. I'd take them there. Even when I go to Kenya, the shirts that I don't wear anymore or other stuff, I don't take them to charity bank or clothes bank, because I know these people, I've got their phone numbers. I could say I've given this person my clothes that I don't use anymore. Obviously, as a farmer, I use those hand-me-downs at work too, because I'm not spending money on Ridgeline or anything like that. So I think I had flavors of rural life from back home, like actual rural life, because I think, like I said, here it's rural, but it's not really rural. You're not collecting water from the river and trying to balance a 20-litre bucket on your head. You're not waking up in the morning and taking cows down to the river to drink or goats down to the river. For me, that's rural. So fast forward to UK rural. For me, it was quite fascinating, like the space. So obviously, when we moved here, we lived in a town called Camberley, which is in Surrey, probably about 45 minutes from London. And you just obviously a town. You got houses, terrace, semi-detached, all these things I didn't know when we moved here. I know now. So when I came to the farm for a week's work experience, and it's only half an hour from Camberley, this farm, I was like, wow, these fields that I always used to see on it whenever went on train journeys or driving in the car with Dad. I'm actually here now. Like the sheds, the size of the sheds, like we've got a grain drying shed here. Like that used to fascinate me. Grass seed sheds. I remember the first time I drove, in my first week actually, I had a license, but I'd never driven a Land Rover before. So the farmer, David, said to me, can you drive this? I said, I can drive. I said, okay, jump in now. There's a trailer there. There's got 3 cows in it with calves. Take them back to the farm. I'm like, where's the farm? Go this way, turn left there, blah, 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 blah. So I go off and I'm so excited. Like, yeah. I'm in a Land Rover. Like, oh my God. I remember actually putting a Facebook status back then saying, I just drove a Land Rover. And I stole it so many times. Oh my God. Like, it's so bad. But it's little things that I used to get so fascinated. But even driving a tractor, getting in a tractor, for me, that was such a big thing. Bringing my friends that I went to school with that townies whenever, like after nights out, because I took a year out. So on student nights, I'd go on student nights when my friends were on holiday from uni. And they dropped me off to the farm at like 6 a.m, me starting work at 6. And they'd be so fascinated seeing the loaders in the yard, seeing skid steers and tractors. And I don't know how long it took for me to just see that as normal, but I remember it used to fascinate me a lot. And then you've also got the side of seeing people that look like me or are black people in the countryside. I was quite naive about that. And because I was going into farming because I didn't know anything about it. And then after the week, I thought, actually, this is a bit of me. I kept working. I just wanted to learn. I wasn't focusing so much on, I'm on my own. There's not many people that look like me. All the little jokes or what is now termed as casual racism, all those little jokes, they never went in because I was thinking I'm just being sort of teased because they're getting friendly with me. I'm going to be part of a group now, so I could just take it on the chin. But then now, as close to being an adult at 31, I think if I was to join farming now, I would struggle. So I'm glad I joined it when I was naive than joining it now.
That's fascinating. Okay.
Yeah.
So how did you get into that thought that farming even became a possibility in your mind?
Yeah. So summer of 2010, got my A-level results and they were bleak. I think I got C's and D's and I was like, what now? So I remember we sat in a room with my tutor, my mom, dad, and my sister. You know, when parents look at you like, what do we do with this? And so the teacher was suggesting, oh, well, you like animals, you could do animal sciences. So I think I applied to Lincoln, Uni, Hartbury, I think Harper, and Sparshot College. And I didn't get into Harper. I didn't have enough acres. No, I'm joking. I applied for the wrong degree. I think if I applied for a different degree, I probably would have got in. But I just applied for one that needed higher grades. I got a place at Hartbury, and I got to play two places at Lincoln Uni, and one place for Sparshot. I ended up at Sparshot, and because it was an animal management degree, I needed experience in sort of work with animals. I didn't have much. I'd done 6 weeks at different vet practices because I was still focused on going to do vet. Yeah, so I needed to do farm work. I got that week in, and at the time I was working at the local NHS hospital as a medical lab assistant.
Okay.
And so I did that week, and I was working weekends at the hospital. So on the Friday, David said to me, "What are you doing on Monday?" I was like, "I'm just playing Xbox." He said, "No, you're coming here to work. So see you on Monday." So I was like, "Okay, I've got a job now." So I was doing Monday to Thursday, Friday having my chill time. How I missed that. And then Saturday, Sunday working at the hospital. And then he got to Monday to Friday because he didn't like the fact that I just sat at home on a Friday. And then I quit my job at the hospital and I was full time on the farm. Right. I got a caravan at the back, and so that was me, full on farming. I think from November 2010 through to beginning of September 2011. Then I went to Spa Shop and did my degree there.
Yeah, you had your time there, and then coming out the other side, how did you get the job at Plumpton College? Because you started there as an assistant pig unit manager there.
So Plumpton, a classmate of mine, Gemma, who was a dairy farmer's daughter from Devon, she saw this job advert saying, "Oh, look at this assistant pig unit manager job at Plumpton College." And in my head, my friend Patrick and Benny, who's from Brunei, we'd planned after uni, let's go to Brunei. I was like, okay, we're going to go traveling. So
that sounds pretty great.
So we needed to do a personal development sort of folder about the career you want to go in. So get interviews in, talk to people in the field you want to go in. So there was a pig manager at Spa Shop called John Garrett, who I learned so much from. So I asked him, what should I do? He said, talk to this person. So I thought applying for this job was part of my portfolio. So I applied that, ticked that box. Then I got an email saying, you've been invited to an interview. I was like, here's an interview, tick that box as well. Went for the interview. And then I remember it was 7th February 2014. It was deadline for my dissertation. And as students, I was doing everything to the wire. I get a phone call from Plumpton College saying, we'd like to offer you the job. And I was like, right, okay. Wow. I don't finish my degree till June, July. Let me ask my lecturer. So I ran up to the office, I spoke to our sort of lecturer and said, Kerry, what do I do? I've got this job. She was like, go. Yeah. So I called back. I called back Plumpton. I was like, right, I can come, but I still want to be a student for at least a month. So I pushed off starting till April the 7th. Yeah, so I moved to Plumpton April the 5th and then started on the 7th. And it was an eye-opener, sort of going from being a student to working. And I was still commuting to Winchester once or twice every 2 weeks to go to lectures. So that was pretty good. But then I found the transition from student to full-time work, especially when I was involved with students, quite seamless because I was quite relatable to them. And even though sometimes it was a bit hard to have that boundary of, right, you need to respect me, I'm a member of staff because I'm similar age to them, I quickly managed to get over that by sort of like the knowledge gap. So even though they're looking at me as a young person like them, because I knew more than them, not in a way that I know more than you, shut up, but it's I know more than you, listen to me. Yeah, I'm trying to guide you. That helped a lot. So I ended up being roped into doing practicals from September. I was supposed to do it from September 2014 to 2015. But by February 2015, we'd finish everything. And students are sort of in practicals are on their fines. And I was like, they know they're finished. They know we're just wasting time. So I just said, look, we finished what we needed to do. If you need me for anything else, I'll do it. But I don't want to waste my time teaching people that know that you're wasting their time. So I did more sort of guest lectures, and it was quite good because one day I could be dealing with level 1 diploma. So people with sometimes severe learning difficulties. So you're doing basic stuff like moving pigs, feeding hoppers, to talking to vet nurses who are degree level, and the questions would be more challenging. So I did enjoy that sort of switch all the time. And it also taught me to be able to sort of break down information. So you could talk about a pig to someone that's a level 1 diploma on a basic level, here's a pig, this. But to someone that's a degree level, you could talk to them at a sort of deeper level, like from evolutionary way, how they related to our boy, etc., etc. So I think, working at Plumpton helped me learn how to judge the audience, if you see what I mean.
Yeah. Do they have an indoor or an outdoor system, or both? Or?
Indoor, yeah. Indoor unit. Actually, they built a new one just as I left, or were building a new one just as I left. In my second stint in 2021, because I had 2 stints at Plumpton.
And tell us about the unit that you're on at the moment in terms of how that compares and how it works.
Yeah, so the unit I'm on at the moment I just call it hybrids. We're outdoor and indoor. So we have piglets outside. The sows are outside. Apart from when I wean them and take them indoors to the shed, then they get served. Then they stay in there until I scan them at around 4 weeks. Well, I say scan. We have boars in with them. If the boar jumps, the sow has returned. If the boar doesn't jump, the sow's pregnant. So that's what I call scanning. After that point, and then take them out. So they're inside probably 2 months of the year. The rest of the time they're outside. And then the offspring, they get weaned at 4 weeks, go into sort of groups of 30 to 40 outside till they're around 12 weeks. And we put them inside till they're around 20 weeks when we take them to slaughter and take them to a farm shop.
Yeah, I was going to say, and most of the meat's going through the farm shop.
Yes, I'd say about 60%. So, and then towards the summer and Christmas, more than that. It goes through the farm shop. At the moment, we're on 15 to 20 pigs a week in the farm shop, which I'm going to go butcher after this.
Let's look at the pig sector generally, because as you were alluding to at the beginning as well, it's been a bit of a rough time recently, and there are always these peaks and troughs in the sector, but it has been particularly rough recently. I just wondered if you can give us your overview of the situation at the moment with regards to challenges, but also, as you're an optimistic person, give us some optimism for moving forward.
Yeah, so I'll give a disclaimer here, and I know as a vice chair for MPA, this is me speaking, Flavian Obiero. I'm not speaking for MPA. I'm not speaking for anyone. This is me speaking. Personally, I think as pig farmers, or as farmers in general, because it's not just pig farmers facing it, poultry people are facing it. As farmers in general, across board, we need to know our worth. And by knowing our worth is not saying we think we're worthless, but we need to vocalize that worth. We need to action that worth. I know it's easy to say as a small farm with a farm shop, but I think if, like, let's say, look at the French, and I know that's an extreme example. If things don't go their way, they make it hard. Whereas here, if things don't go our way, we lobby, we talk, we meet again, we have round tables, we ask, we talk, and nothing happens. So I think if we're a bit more, I'm going to say brutal, if we're a bit more brutal and straight with what we want, it's going to come. Because I think, look at how during lockdown, local farm shops were like the saving grace. Like, I was in Sussex back then. There was a butcher that couldn't keep up. Like, some of the beef you couldn't hang long enough because people just they stopped going to supermarket because obviously being in a crowded place, COVID or whatever, everyone just went to the farm shops. And I know it's easy, again, to say this as a small farm because you can't always have, if you've got a unit of 10,000 sows, you can't have a farm shop, but it's harder. But I think if we work together more often, whether it's just in pigs or like I see in the dairy sector, they are buying groups. Together, you're stronger. So if, let's say you have a southeast pigs, southwest, north, south, and all that, if a region was to say, Tesco or whoever, if you don't pay us this money, we're not supplying it. And another tactic, I would say, is that we need to get the public on side. Because we might get ignored by the government. We might get ignored by supermarkets, but the supermarkets will never ignore the public. At the moment and previously, they use the line of, we don't want to push a cost to the consumer. We don't want to make the consumer pay more in a cost of living crisis. Meanwhile, farmers who are also consumers are getting squeezed. if we got to a point where the public were fully behind us, the supermarkets, the public say jump, they'll jump. Because could you imagine a situation where the public say we're not going to go to a supermarket for a week? You imagine how much stress that would cause. The egg saga, how quickly did that blow up when my friend Yohan did that video, and it went viral because people were interested, the public interested, and pushed it to the right channels, and the media got hold of it. And in not knowing our worth, we've got such a big ally in the public. But we shouldn't just assume that because the public are British, we should just assume that they're going to support us. They need to have a reason to support us, because at the end of the day, money talks. People can say, oh, welfare this, welfare that. You hear people saying, we want to see pigs outside, we want to see cows outside, we want to see all this. When it comes to paying, you got outdoor reared, outdoor bred, indoor pig, free range, organic. Someone's going to go for what suits their pocket. So in that process of getting the public on side and letting the public know what we do and be open, we all make mistakes. If the public knows what goes on behind farming, they understand, like Jeremy Clarkson has done, they understand, and they'll probably be more likely to be like, okay, actually, this is going to cost me, I don't know, 10, 20p more, but because I saw Farmer Ben struggling that day on a windy day, I reckon this is worth it. And they do that. But just constantly using slogans like Back British and all that without any substance to it, to me, I think we've got to a point where we need to do more than just say hashtag Back British, because it's not enough. We need to get the public on side. That needs to be on a banner on all motorways.
Yeah. So, I mean, farmer listeners listening to this, what small action would you say that they could do in order to help with that?
Yeah. So I know Leaf do Open Farm Sunday, and you don't have to just do the Open Farm Sunday. You could have walks on your farm with public whenever you want, as long as you go through the right channels and there is help out there. Social media is something that's not fully bought into. Honestly, I'm probably at the extreme end of putting things on every channel I can. But I think the amount of conversations I've had with people on TikTok about pig farming. What's the guilt? Why do you win at 4 weeks? Yeah. What's the withdrawal period for this? The amount of conversation, people saying on there, oh, after seeing this, I want to be a farmer. I want to get into farming. Yes, it might be one person in 100, but that's more than zero, in my opinion. Yeah. And also, it's that thing of, and this is across board, this is government, this is society and the world as a whole now, even with the environment, we're trying to fix long-term problems with short-term solutions. It doesn't work. It does not work. We know we've got a problem in the sense that there's a massive gap between consumer and producer. The supply chain is bad. There's no fairness in it at all. We don't have enough help as we should from the government. So all these problems have existed and they've had peaks and troughs, like you say. Even if you're to say, okay, start now, it's not a sprint. This is going to be a marathon. So we just need to keep chugging away slowly, because it's going to come good. The public are going to buy into it. People like Jeremy Clarkson involved in it for the good reasons. That's helping too. So, I'd say farmers just be open, engage with the public, and not just on an advertising level, on your day-to-day level. Because what you think is mundane, like mucking out a pen or picking up a bale from a stack and putting it in a trailer. I had 7 million people watching a video of a sow sounding like a F-150 Ford. Yeah. People saying 7 million people. How? And it's a 30-second clip of a sow sounding like a V8. And I think sometimes I try and equate this to real life to people. And a friend of mine, Wonga, who's a student at Hartbury College from South Africa, we just sat sort of chewing the fat one day with a bit of whiskey, saying how when you look at the way algorithms work and the sort of social media space and numbers and stuff, someone will put something on there and let's say you get 10 likes or 20 or 30 or someone get 1,000. Could you imagine one day walking down the street, you dressed up, let's say at Oxford Farming Conference, you're going to the debate and you get 30 people stop you and say, Ben, you look amazing today. How would that feel to you?
It would feel pretty good.
Yeah. Yeah. So I know people chase numbers all the time, but when you look at the impact reaching like 1,000 people, telling them a message, 1,000 people, that's a lot of people. Because how many times you have 1,000 people as an audience? Hardly ever. So
Absolutely.
yeah, I think let's grasp social media as farmers and take it.
Just a little more about our primary sponsor, A-Plan Rural. They provide bespoke insurance cover for farms and estates. This could be for anything from tractors and machinery to a new exciting diversification venture. So for more information, visit aplan.co.uk/rural. That's aplan.co.uk/rural. Let's move on to the challenges section. So I always ask guests before they come on the show to tell me, in their view, what is one of the biggest challenges facing British agriculture. And you said lack of personnel diversity and the somewhat lacklustre attitude to changing this situation. What do you mean by lacklustre attitude?
Lackluster. I'm rubbing my hands for the audio viewers as we get into this topic. Lackluster ties in with a comment a friend of mine the other day, Thebe, said performative allyship. And the lacklusterness in it is that there's too many words and not enough action. I can say this in the sense that from 2010, November 2010, 18th, I've got a weird memory like that, apologies. 18th November 2010, today.
I wish I had a memory like that.
To today, there's still things I see and hear now that I did then. Like I said, I was naive when I started, and some of these things, I think as racism stuff, which a lot of it is ignorance rather than malice. Like a few examples, things like saying, if you get a blood blister, it's called a black man's pinch. Nickname I used to have, Darky. Little things like that. It's not malice. It's just, I don't know. I don't want to call it endearing because it's not really endearing. To who it's coming from, it could be endearing, but the impact on it doesn't. People don't think about what they say. Like I had a driver here before Christmas from Abergavenny in Wales deliver some pig acts for us, and we're just having a chat. I said, "Oh, I don't see many black farmers." I said, "Yeah, well, you've seen one now." Anyway, we just had a nice chat, and I'm very fond of the Welsh. And I think my fondness of the Welsh is that as a Kenyan and someone that has come to this country, I have a Kenyan accent. And at school, or even now when I talk, I'm conscious of my Kenyan accent, and I try and speak in a way that's more eloquent for people to understand me, so I don't get what people asking stuff like that. And I find the Welsh are the same. It's like a Welsh person has an accent. They speak English, but they've got an accent. And the fact that Welsh people that speak Welsh, like at the NFU conference, I was with some of the boys and they were speaking Welsh. I said, I'm going to download Duolingo and I want to learn Welsh because I think it's such a cool language. That's why I'm drawn to the Welsh, I think, because I think we share that thing of you can speak English, but you sound different. So this guy said to me, "Oh, well, sometimes he delivers in London with his daughter who also drives a lorry." And he said one day, I can't remember what part of London they were in, and he said to his daughter, "Oh, and there's loads of coons here." And like when you hear something like that, I was stood in the yard and I was like, "What?" And he said, "Yeah." I said, "Well, that's the term I always used growing up." And I said, "You can't say that." He said, "Yeah, my daughter told me not to say that because that's not something you can say anymore." And I was like, that is the equivalent to the N-word or worse. And I said, in some circles, we wouldn't even be talking anymore. This would have ended badly. If you were to say this on a high street, some places in London on a night out, that is the end. Like there's a fight there. So in his instance, after the 10, 15-minute talk, he understood where I was coming from. And I think it's that exposure or lack of exposure, lack of education with a tincture of ignorance there as well. But in the day and age that we live in now, in that situation, it's good that his daughter pulled him up straight away. But for some reason, even though he got pulled up, he felt the need to probably say it to me, whether it's just testing waters, whether it's just to see, okay, is this as bad as my daughter told me? But I think in this day and age, we have internet. Like people have access to the internet. Like if you don't know a recipe, you search it. If you think of a term or you hear a term and you think, "Oh, what does the N word mean? What does this word mean?" Search it and you're going to find out. So I think in the same vein that like smoking in pubs used to be a thing. When we moved here in 2006, 11th June, you'd go to a pub and you'd come home stinking of smoke because people used to smoke inside. There's probably more incidences of drink driving back then too. You don't see that now. So humans, as the most intelligent species that we say we are, because sometimes we're not, most of the times we're not, we can learn things and we can also unlearn. So I think this whole thing of, oh, it's a generational thing, or I live in a village in the middle of some sort of extreme island somewhere or corner of the UK, I don't see these people. So I don't need to sort of engage with this community. I think that's a cop out because
it doesn't matter.
If you think, let's focus on farmers. Even if you're a tractor dealer, even if you're a mechanic or whatever, if you put the dots together, okay, let's say a tractor dealer, you always deal with white farmers. That's fine. Your farmer that's buying that tractor is growing wheat. That wheat is getting sold somewhere, probably going to get turned into flour to make chapati, to make roti, to make bread. So someone somewhere along that chain isn't like you. So it's just understanding that wider concept that you're living in a world, we're only an island, like 60 odd million people. Yeah. There's a bigger world out there, bigger than you.
Yeah.
So we just need to understand that the world is coming more like Mum says, global village. Like you have people sort of living here and working in Europe and vice versa. Like my sister the other day, she messaged me saying, I fancy working she works from home for an LA-based company. And she was like, I'm going to work from Tenerife next week because my friend has a flat there. She was gone. She was in Tenerife for a week whilst working.
This is the world we live in now.
Yeah, she's 23. 2 weeks later, she's like, I'm going to go to New York for a week. And that was that. And that's the world we're living in. And I think that age won't struggle with this. Like they're used to it already. But people older than me, my parents' age and a bit older, they're the ones that are going to struggle more. But if they've managed to cope with an iPhone 14, you can unlearn being prejudiced. So get on with it.
Yeah. I mean, you've also spoken in the past. I mean, we've mentioned quite a bit today as well, the term casual racism. Isn't all racism casual or not?
Exactly, because you don't hear casual pedophilia or you don't hear casual homophobia. You're either a homophobe or not. You're either a pedophile or you're not. You don't get casual robbery, like nicking your wallet or doing a heist in a bank. You're still a thief. And I think to tie into that the casual racism bit, I think people are scared to make mistakes. I'd say not everyone is like me, but I'd rather someone made a mistake and I corrected them and they learn from their mistake. And then if they make it again, the same one, then we have a problem, rather than just blanket saying, if you make a mistake, you're cancelled. I don't agree with that, but that's just a personal opinion. The lacklusterness is linked to that scared to make a mistake. And I think no one's perfect. Like even me, when I first moved here as a 15-year-old going into uni, I didn't have much experience with the LGBT community. Growing up in Kenya, you're either Muslim, Christian, Hindu. We had a few Jews as well. So you're always in a religion. And we know what religion says about these things. And I had to learn, and thanks to my sister, some of my friends, my fiance, I had to learn that you're being brought up like that, but that's wrong. Like you need to switch up and learn. And now I've got friends in the LGBTQ plus community, and I often ask them questions like, "What does that mean?
Yeah,
I don't compute this. Tell me, what does it mean?" And once I've understood it, or I've been told about it, even if it doesn't sit well with me, that's not the point. The point is to respect a human being as a human being. The point is give everyone equal and equality and equity. Equity probably better than equality. And just to live harmoniously. And I think to go on with the back to lacklusterness and the whole thing of people being scared of being seen as a token or doing tokenistic gestures or box ticking, which I was recently told, about last year maybe, that I needed to be involved in a particular video to tick a box. And when you see something and you think it yourself, you think, yeah, I'm just ticking the box, that's cool, that's fine. But when it's vocalized, you think, And I remember when I got told that, I pulled the handbrake on the tractor, turned it off, and I said, right, I know that's not what you mean. And I know you've said that because that's what you're doing, but let's go beyond this, because I'm happy to be the box ticker, because I'll get in there. Like, let's say me being in an English agriculture, I know that I'm not going to be a majority. When I wanted to be coming to farming, I searched Black Farmer and Wilfred Emmanuel Jones came up.
Yeah.
If I didn't see him, whether I would have been in or not, I don't know. But for me, seeing Wilfred Emmanuel Jones doing it, I remember watching his documentary. They took kids from London down to his farm in the southwest. I was like, wow, this is doable. And I'm in. So I'm resilient enough and thick-skinned enough, thanks to my probably granddad's genes. Like, he was detained for 9 years during Kenya being under British colony. And when he came out, he was still as stubborn as hell till he died at 95. So thanks to his genes, I'm resilient and thick-skinned enough to take all this. I'll get put in any situation, even to tick a box, that's fine. I'll tick that box. I'll put that box in the recycling so that anyone else coming after me, there's no box for them to be put into. And I think to avoid tokenism, and it's a message for people in agriculture that want to help, to avoid tokenism, do it often. Because probably 10 years ago, seeing a lady on a panel as a farmer would have been seen as tokenistic. Now it's not. And it took pushing, it took too long, but it took that pushing. Like, I'm part of the Next Gen Forum. We've got more ladies than guys.
Yeah.
Our chair, Evie, our vice chair, Liv. I love it because, and it doesn't make me feel less of a man just because there's more ladies there. It's just like, it's life. And the men that, let's say, feel, would it be demasculated, or I don't know what term it is, but any man that feels a bit uneasy when they've got a female leader, don't forget your mum, you got your sister, you got your nan, your wife. Oh, I've got an anecdote actually, which I thought about yesterday about diversity. I think that will wrap it around nicely. When people hear that word, I think it's almost becoming like a trigger word in farming. Like, you hear diversity, you see eyes roll. I remember doing the talking at the cereals with the National Young Farmers Federation, and Tom Pope mentioned that the talk was going to be about diversity, and there was 3 old blokes at the front stood up and walked off. I was like, yeah, that's why we're here talking about it. But I thought it in that, think of a roast dinner. Yeah. The way farming is at the moment is like a roast dinner with just different types of potatoes. You've got Charlotte potatoes in there. You've got, I don't know, Mary's Piper, my favorite, Albert Bartlett, Wiltshire, King Edward, whatever. But an ideal roast plate would have potatoes, roast meat or nut roast, Yorkshire pudding, Brussels sprouts, probably a bit of smoked lardons, a bit of garlic in there, pigs in blankets, nice. Honey and mustard, chardonnay potatoes, cauliflower, cheese, parsnips, gravy, sauce of your choice. So any farmer that's struggling with this concept of diversity, think of that. Would you want a roast dinner plate with just different types of potatoes, or would you want a roast dinner with all the trimmings? I know which one I'd pick, and I know what a lot of farmers would pick. So let's aim for our industry to be like that rather than plate full of potatoes.
That's great. I'm conscious of your time. I'm okay to carry on a little bit longer if you are, but let's just
let's go. Let's go, man.
Yeah,
let's do it.
Because I'd like to ask this question.
Yeah.
Also, before I do, shout out. Also, because you mentioned him for Wilfred's Meet the Farmers episode, please go back and listen to that. I love doing that with him. When George Floyd was murdered in May 2020, and the Black Lives Matter movement was reinvigorated. And actually, going back in this, I didn't actually realize this, but it actually started in July 2013 after George Zimmerman was acquitted in the shooting of Trayvon Martin back in 2012. Mm-hmm. But what impact did that have on you? And what observations did you have at the time of the response in rural Britain?
That for me was a trigger to become like I am now in farming, to become this vocal. That was a trigger because I remember when it happened, everyone was in shock. And it was lockdown, it was 2020. And I'd locked down then with my now fiance, Nikki. Like we'd only known each other weeks, and we were like, screw it, let's just lock down together. And I'm glad it's turned out okay. And like there was protests going around the country, and Brighton was the nearest city. and there's a protest there. And I was like, I've always said, I hate protesting. I hate just walking around. Like that concept for me, I'm always like, nah, I'm not doing it. Nikki was like, you're going to this. And I was like, I tried to justify why I don't want to go, blah, blah, blah. But then sitting back, and I think the whole reflecting and sort of thinking deeper into things probably comes with age, because I never used to be a deep thinker. And probably spending a lot of time on my own, driving and listening to podcasts.
Yeah.
I thought, just because this doesn't affect me directly doesn't mean it shouldn't annoy me. It doesn't mean I shouldn't do something about it. So I remember, I got a Black Lives Matter shirt. I remember making a placard, and we went down to Brighton. And Brighton is a very, anything goes in Brighton. Like, you would walk down the street with a top, bottom pajama Monday morning probably, and no one would care, because people, it's just so free. Like, you do what you want. But then unfortunately, there's also a bit of a community, which I found out then, of sort of some of these far right groups. And I remember on that day, we got there, it was quite family friendly. There was families with kids there walking around. And we got into a situation where it was Nikki and I, and there's about 6 of these blokes around us walking. And they were sort of saying things to trigger me. And I'm thinking, I've got pigs to feed in 2 hours. I've got work tomorrow. I cannot get in an altercation here. Obviously, I'm holding Nikki's hand and like grip is getting tight. I'm just thinking, shit. And it was probably the most unsafe I've ever felt in this country that day, or in that moment. But then as they walked off, we quickly popped down to the beach, had a chill, sat with everyone else, talked about what happened, had a quick cider, and then went back to the farm. But then off the back of that, some of the conversations having with farmers, even with friends. I remember a friend of mine came to pick up some pigs, and he was like, "Oh, you're not going to do this BLM crap, are you?" I was like, "I am. I'm going this weekend." He goes, "Oh," and it's almost like they sort of don't know what to say. And I was like, "Let's load these pigs and we'll have a quick chat about why." And after you talk to someone about it, because everyone, you hear protest, it's like disruption, it's chaos, it's this. A lot of people, even myself, when you hear a protest, you just think, no, I don't want to get involved with that. But then when you look at history, like even people like Martin Luther King, the suffragettes, like the whole thing about women voting and all that, if people didn't protest and cause havoc, there won't be change. So to change something, you always have to disrupt status quo. Like, if you're trying to gain weight or lose weight, you have to disrupt your status quo of everyday living to get there. Either you eat more, like I remember went through a phase of trying to get heavier when I worked in the office. I used to eat like 6 meals a day, which is so uncomfortable. Constantly eating, constantly full. Or if you're gonna trying to drop down weight or lose weight, you're cutting your calories and stuff like that. So I think any change involves some sort of discomfort. And I think humans, and I think your latest episode with Sarah mentioned something about the reason Homo sapiens as a species have got so far is we go for the least resistance route.
Yep.
And even when you look at animals, like let's say lions hunting or whatever, you get a herd of buffalo. They're not going to go for the biggest buffalo at the front. They'll go for that lame old one limping at the back, or a calf. They'll go for that. So I think it's innate. It's innate in us to always go for the shortcut. But then some things we can't, because you take a shortcut, it's just going to come and bite you later. And as the listeners will know, in farming, any shortcut will always catch you out at some point. So, and I'd say the impact of it amplified the minority of ignorant people, I think. And it almost, people are like, oh, it's making the country more divisive. It's like, no, it's just highlighting something that already exists, and it's just been underneath the surface. A comparison for this, in Kenya, you've got more than 40 tribes. During 2007 elections, the tribal clashes, I think in my lifetime, they're probably some of the worst tribal clashes. And that was because of election rigging. And it was, I think it was my mom's tribe, the Kikuyu, and the country were against the leader who was Kikuyu, and you had Luos fighting, Kalenjins, and all these other tribes. And in Kenya, is such a peaceful country, but one trigger, and what's just under is having a scab. Some scabs you can pick, and it doesn't bleed. You pick the wrong one, and it bleeds. And that's what I describe what the BLM movement did. It's not that all these divisions and racism didn't exist in this country. They were there, but it's just calm, and you just needed that trigger. And I saw this firsthand with the article I did with Farmers Weekly. Shout out Ollie Hill, who was the community editor then, who got in touch with me. And the comments that were there on Facebook, oh my God. I've got a folder in my phone. I screenshotted most of those comments, and I look at them as motivation. I'm like, these people, the way they were saying that there, I just look at that as motivation, because when it comes to a time when farming will be more diverse, and it will come, as long as I'm involved in farming, it's going to happen. When that time comes, I'll look back at these comments and think, look at all that, all these years, and that's where we've come from. And yeah, I think it opened my eyes to some of the ignorance that exists out there, because it's wild.
So bringing all that together, what would progress look like for you in terms of diversity in the farming community and the wider rural community?
Progress for me would be active allyship, because it's obvious that we're living in a country, a European country, even though we're not in EU geographically, it's a European country, and there's bound to be more white people than non-white people. That's obvious. Like when people say, oh, you don't get many white farmers in Nigeria. So, well, Nigeria didn't colonize Britain, so that argument can go in the bin, as well as some of your views. I think active allyship will accelerate this progress quite quickly, I think, because if it's just me beating the drum, if it's just Steve beating the drum, if it's just like Wilfred beating the drum, or the few sort of non-white people in agriculture beating the drum, it will take ages. But we need organizations, let's say NFU, which I'm involved in, MPA, which I'm involved in, and I'd say they've got their work cut out, because if I'm involved in there, you're going to hear about it. So I'm always going to be sort of causing havoc positively from within. And that's why I'm trying to get in as much as I can, because I think you can't cause change being on the outside. Well, you can, but it will take longer.
We're going to have to start to round things up. I could keep talking to you all day, but we're going to finish with the final two questions. The first is, Flavian Obiero, your message for the public.
Message for the public, I'd say engage with us. Look for your the nearest farm near you or around you, or any open space in the countryside. Just engage with the countryside, engage with the space, engage with us, and find out what we do to get food on the table for you. And thank you for supporting us, or continually supporting us.
And your message for farmers?
We need to engage with the public. Like this, I think this is our saving grace now. Because like I said earlier, we might get ignored as farmers, we might get ignored by the government, might get ignored by the supermarkets, but they will never ignore the public, because they pay their bills. The supermarket shareholders rely on the public. The government relies on the public to be voted in. So if we've got the public on our side, we can do anything. So engage with the public as much as you can.
And finally, do you have a recommendation for a blog, podcast, or social media account to follow? And that can be farming or non-farming.
Oh, I would say social media accounts, there's so many. I'm not even going to bother mentioning any. Go through mine and you can find loads. Podcast-wise, your one definitely. And that's not just me saying that. I've binged on, I think I've listed like 4 or 5 in the last 2 days. Of Meet the Farmer, and I'm learning a lot from different people. Some people I already know, some I don't. There's one, again, I think farmers, to try and get our minds sort of working out, or challenge a little bit differently, I try and listen to podcasts that are completely different to farming. So one I listen to is called The Diary of a CEO, and
Yeah,
some of the gems you get on there are just something else. For the casual listeners, pub yields, a couple of Welsh boys. Oh my God.
Give Jacob and Daya,
And another one called And It's in Our Roots is another good one.
And finally, how do people follow you?
Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, LinkedIn,
All the
Facebook.
places.
I hardly use, but it's there. And YouTube. YouTube's not. I've used it a little bit, but I've taken a pause. But we're soon to be tenant farmers, so my journey will be on there. Get involved on YouTube. I'll be uploading a lot of stuff on there soon.
Cool. Well, awesome. Flavian, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate you coming on the show and giving us your thoughts about pigs, diversity, and so much more. So it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Ben.
That's it for today. If you haven't already, please do like and subscribe to the show wherever you're listening. Leave us a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Next week, we'll be in Gloucestershire to meet Helen Griffiths. And on the Rural Business Focus podcast this week, we're talking about setting short-term smart goals. Thanks again to Flavian for today and to our primary podcast sponsor, A-Plan Rural Insurance, for supporting the show. Please see the show notes for more information and for any links mentioned today. For now, though, I'm Ben Eagle. This has been Meet the Farmers. Thank you very much for listening, and I hope you all have a great week.